Broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California. Your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
It was a tough day to be Hillary Clinton today. She faced the committee, the Trey Gowdy committee, investigating the Benghazi situation, and there were fireworks all the way around. We're going to be bringing you a number of different clips so that you have the latest. And this really is the most important thing that you can know about Hillary. In her own words, her own behavior, her own reactions, and not just her words, but her attitude toward your right to know a lot of this information. It was an epic day in the committee for certain. It brought up a lot of major issues. There were a number of congressmen that I've never heard of who now will become household names to some extent, at least to those who are paying attention to politics. And hopefully everyone is, because the last thing in the world I want is to have somebody like this who acts this way toward the American public, having the ability to control my life, having the ability to take away my right to keep and bear arms, which she's made clear that she wants to do. Hillary wants to confiscate your guns with a national gun buyback program modeled after Australia. And yet she couldn't provide basic security and couldn't answer basic questions when it came down to just being accountable for what she does at her job. I mean, that's what this was really all about. And we're going to take you through it blow by blow. So in this opening monologue, I don't want to get into every single detail, but I want you to understand how significant this is. Because I just happened to catch All the President's Men last night on television. It just happened to be on. I tuned into, I think I saw the bulk of the movie. I didn't see the Watergate break-in, but I saw the aftermath and the cover-up. You know, back then, you literally had men and women who were in positions of power who knew that they had to answer. Period. They knew they had to answer to the public once the questions came. And when they had been involved in doing things such as obstructing justice, such as administering a slush fund, doing all kinds of dirty tricks. And they did all this, by the way, through the government. They weren't just doing it through the re-election campaign. This was being done from the halls of power. You had the sitting attorney general deeply ingrained in the corruption and the illegal activity. And they were using state resources to go after their enemies, their political enemies. And a lot of that still goes on today, but nobody seems to care. But back then, this was earth-shattering. And it really struck me, because the final scene in the movie, after all of the nails are in the coffin and the story's written and the cat's out of the bag, something interesting happens. And this is something that has never happened with Hillary Clinton. And it didn't happen today, by the way. I just want to let you know. In the final scene in All the President's Men with Woodward and Bernstein, the investigative reporters from the Washington Post, you see this old computer printer, typing out with the clickety-clack, typing out the words. I actually, a small part of me misses those old printers. I'm sorry. This quiet, boom, everything's on a page isn't the same as the back and forth like a typewriter. I always loved that. I thought that was so amazing. But be that as it may, what was particularly noteworthy was the fact that you had so many major high elected officials that when they were confronted with the evidence and confronted with the truth, they admitted what they did. I'm going to say that again. You had high elected officials who had been caught up in corruption, who had broken the law, and when they were confronted with the facts and confronted with the evidence, which, by the way, did not happen because of a law enforcement agency, because the law enforcement agencies like the FBI and others were complicit in the cover-up. It happened because of two reporters who refused to give up until they got the truth. That's what happened. They got to the truth. And if you had reporters like that today, then Hillary Clinton would likely be behind bars. Certainly Bill Clinton would. And not because he had sex with Monica Lewinsky, but because of many of the things we discussed yesterday having to do with forcible rape, having to do with illegal activities, having to do with money, the Clinton cash, the foundation, the pay for play, all of this corruption that adds up and ultimately becomes much ado about nothing in this world, because the New York Times will not report it that way, because the Washington Post will not report it that way, because they believe that they need to be the protectors of the good. And to them, Democrats are good, and the liberal progressive agenda, the Marxist agenda, is the good agenda, and that outweighs the individual criminality of individuals like Bill and Hillary Clinton. And see, to me, when you look at it and forget that Bill and Hillary are Democrats, because Richard Nixon was a Republican, and back then it was the Republicans eventually fessed up. And I'm not saying that Democrats wouldn't have done the same thing. I think they would have back then. I think it was a different time. I think we had a different sense of morality. And what I mean by morality is simply owning up to the truth. The truth is the truth. And what Hillary is doing here, instead of presenting a factual case, instead of presenting a blow by blow, you're confronted with a woman who doesn't seem to care what happened. She makes several flippant remarks, which will play you, to Representative Jim Jordan, who I believe is from Ohio. She says to him, after he literally reads to her over and over and over again and shows up on a PowerPoint, up on a projector screen, shows her actual words, points them out, blows them up, and reads them to her very slowly and deliberately. And she casts aspersions on what he is saying, and he calls her out and says, "No, you can't say that I'm characterizing this way. I am simply reading from your own words, Madam Secretary." And then she tells him, "You need to go get a copy of my latest book, Hard Choices, because I wrote a whole chapter on this. That's how much it meant to me." When she says that, you've got to watch it on video later tonight when you get home. When somebody references their book, when they're being interrogated about the deaths of 4 Americans, when they're being interrogated about the unnecessary deaths because of failures to act in her official capacity and in the official capacity of Secretary of State, Department of Defense, and the State Department. I mean, these are major issues. This is not about who had sex with whom or any minor issue in the grander scheme of things. This is about life and death and what she knew and when she knew it. She doesn't seem to care. 323-746-TALK is our number. We will be right back with a clip to bring you up to date on the hearings in Washington, D.C. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. You are listening to the Radio Free California Network, and I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. And we're talking about the hearings that took place today in Washington, D.C. at the committee chaired by Trey Gowdy, looking into what happened at Benghazi. And there is a great deal to cover, and not much time to do it. I want to get into a clip. I don't know if we can roll that first one, Sean, with Congressman Jim Jordan.
Gentlelady from California yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just gave a long answer, Madam Secretary, to Ms. Sanchez about what you heard that night, what you're doing, but nowhere in there did you mention a video. You didn't mention a video because there was never a video-inspired protest in Benghazi. There was in Cairo, but not in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland, your spokesperson at the State Department, hours after the attack said this: Benghazi has been attacked by militants. In Cairo, police have removed demonstrators. Benghazi, you got weapons and explosions. Cairo, you got spray paint and rocks. 1 hour before the attack in Benghazi, Chris Stevens walks the diplomat to the front gate. The ambassador didn't report a demonstration. He didn't report it because it never happened. An eyewitness in the command center that night on the ground said no protest, no demonstration. 2 intelligence reports that day. No protest, no demonstration. The attack starts at 3:42 Eastern Time, ends at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night. At 4:06, an ops alert goes out across the State Department. It says this: mission under attack, armed men, shots fired, explosions heard. No mention of a video, no mention of a protest, no mention of a demonstration. But the best evidence is Greg Hicks, the number 2 guy in Libya, the guy who worked side by side with Ambassador Stevens. He was asked if there had been a protest, would the ambassador have reported it? Mr. Hicks' response: absolutely. For there to have been a demonstration on Chris Stevens' front door and him not to have reported it is unbelievable, Mr. Hicks said. He said, secondly, if it had been reported, he would have been out the back door within minutes, and there was a back gate. Everything points to a terrorist attack. We just heard from Mr. Pompeo about the long history of terrorist incidents, terrorist violence in the country, and yet 5 days later, Susan Rice goes on 5 TV shows, and she says this: Benghazi was a spontaneous reaction as a consequence of a video. A statement we all know is false. But don't take my word for it. Here's what others have said. Rice was off the reservation on 5 networks. White House worried about the politics. Republicans didn't make those statements. They were made by the people who work for you in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau, the actual experts on Libya in the State Department. So, if there's no evidence for a video-inspired protest, then where'd the false narrative start? Started with you, Madam Secretary. At 10:08, on the night of the attack, you released this statement: some have sought to justify the vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material posted on the internet. At 10:08, with no evidence, at 10:08, before the attack is over, At 10:08, when Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty are still on the roof of the annex fighting for their lives, the official statement of the State Department blames a video. Why?
During the day on September 11th, as you did mention, Congressman, there was a very large protest against our embassy in Cairo. Protesters breached the walls. They tore down the American flag. And it was of grave concern to us because the inflammatory video had been shown on Egyptian television, which has a broader reach than just inside Egypt. And if you look at what I said, I referred to the video that night in a very specific way. I said some have sought to justify the attack because of the video. I used those words deliberately, not to ascribe a motive to every attacker, but as a warning to those across the region that there was no justification for further attacks. And in fact, during the course of that week, we had many attacks that were all about the video. We had people breaching the walls of our embassies in Tunis and Khartoum. We had people, thankfully not Americans, dying at protests, but that's what was going on, Congressman.
Secretary Clinton, I appreciate most of those attacks were after the attack on the facility in Benghazi. You mentioned Cairo. It was interesting what else Ms. Newland said that day. She said, if pressed by the press, if there's a connection between Cairo and Benghazi, she said this: there's no connection between the two. So here's what troubles me. Your experts knew the truth. Your spokesperson knew the truth. Greg Hicks knew the truth. But what troubles me more is I think you knew the truth. I want to show you a few things here. You're looking at an email you sent to your family. Here's what you said. At 11 o'clock that night, approximately 1 hour after you told the American people it was a video, you say to your family, 2 officers were killed today in Benghazi by an Al-Qaeda-like group. You tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. Also, on the night of the attack, you had a call with the president of Libya. Here's what you said to him. Ansar al-Sharia is claiming responsibility. It's interesting, Mr. Katala, one of the guys arrested and charged, actually belonged to that group. And finally, and most significantly, the next day, within 24 hours, you had a conversation with the Egyptian Prime Minister. You told him this: we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. Let me read that one more time. We know, not we think, not it might be, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest. State Department experts knew the truth. You knew the truth, but that's not what the American people got. And again, the American people want to know why. Why didn't you tell the American people exactly what you told the Egyptian Prime Minister?
Let's pause it right there because I want to get to that when we get back. But look, this is how you go about questioning someone of Hillary Clinton's stature and attitude, because what he's done, this Representative Jim Jordan, he's laid out a very simple case. She blamed the video. She threw it out there before the attack was even over. She was in political mode. And yet, half an hour later, 27 minutes later, after the attack is over, she is telling her family it was a terrorist attack. She's telling world leaders like the Libyan president and the Egyptian prime minister the next day that it was clearly a terrorist attack, and she named the terrorists. But then she has her spokesman for the department Susan Rice, go out on television 5 days later on Sunday, on all the Sunday shows, and blame it on these poor little video makers who then became the target, who had to fear for their lives, who literally had produced some low-budget video that had nothing to do with anything. They might have been protesting about it in Cairo, but that had nothing to do with this deliberate terrorist attack on the anniversary of 9/11 on our embassy in Benghazi. We will continue this coverage and take your calls throughout the show. Stay tuned.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
Hey, we are talking about the hearings today on Capitol Hill, grilling Madam Secretary. You know they made that television show with Tia Leone to create this caricature of how they view Hillary Clinton, which is, I'm sorry, but Hillary doesn't measure up to Tia Leone's version of Madam Secretary, but certainly, wow, she could use a tune-up. Just before the break, and by the way, we're taking your calls, so if you want to call while we're doing this, we'll just have to fit you in around the clips. 323-746-TALK. Prior to the break, you had a picture-perfect textbook example of how to handle somebody of her stature, somebody who is running for president, somebody who thinks very highly of herself. And Jim Jordan just goes through and he lays out the facts in a very, very clear and concise way. And Hillary never answers any of his questions directly. She was just about, because he asked her, why did you tell the American public one thing and then tell your family, the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister, and another thing? Why did your personnel, like your press secretary, why did they have a completely different answer ready if they were pressed by the media? And yet you put out a narrative that was political in nature, that would spare the Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton Secretary of State, your administration, any embarrassment over the fact that Libya was not this picture-perfect example of the brilliant foreign policy executed by none other than yourself. And so let's go ahead and roll her answer.
Why didn't you tell the American people exactly what you told the Egyptian prime minister?
Well, I think if you look at the statement that I made, I clearly said that it was an attack, and I also said that there were some who tried to justify it on the basis of the video, Congressman. And I think
but real quick, calling it an attack is like saying the sky's blue. Of course, it was an attack.
Well,
we want to know the truth. The statement you sent out was a statement on Benghazi, and you say vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material on the internet. If that's not pointing as the motive of being a video, I don't know what is. And that's certainly how the American people saw it.
Well, Congressman, there was a lot of conflicting information that we were trying to make sense of. The situation was very fluid. It was fast moving. There was also a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia. And when I talked to the Egyptian prime minister, I said that this was a claim of responsibility by Ansar al-Sharia, by a group that was affiliated, or at least wanted to be affiliated, with al-Qaeda. Sometime after that, the next day, early the next morning after that, on the 12th or 13th, they retracted their claim of responsibility.
Madam Secretary?
And I think if you look at what all of us were trying to do, and we were in a position, Congressman, of trying to make sense of a lot of incoming information and watch the way the intelligence community tried to make sense of it.
Madam Secretary.
So all I can say is nobody...
There was not conflicting information the day of the attack because your press secretary said, if pressed, there's no connection between Cairo and Benghazi. It was clear. You're the ones who muddied it up, not the information.
Well, there's no connection.
Here's what I think's going on.
I love the way he keeps going after
Here's
her.
what I think's going on. Let me show you one more slide. Again, this is from Victoria Nuland, your press person. She says to Jake Sullivan, Philippe Reines, subject line reads this: Romney's statement on Libya. Email says this is what Ben was talking about. I assume Ben is the now somewhat famous Ben Rhodes, author of the Talking Points memo. This email's at 10:35, 27 minutes after your 10:08 statement. 27 minutes after you've told everyone it's a video. While Americans are still fighting because the attack's still going on, your top people are talking politics. Seems to me that night you had three options, Secretary. You could tell the truth, like you did with your family, like you did with the Libyan president, like you did with the Egyptian prime minister. Tell them it was a terrorist attack. You could say, you know what, we're not quite sure. Don't really know for sure. I don't think the evidence is there. I think it's all in the first one, but you could have done that. But you picked a third option. You picked the video narrative. You picked the one with no evidence, and you did it because Libya was supposed to be, as Mr. Roskin pointed out, this great success story for the Obama White House and the Clinton State Department. And a key campaign theme that year was GM's alive, bin Laden's dead, Al-Qaeda's on the run. And now you have a terrorist attack. And it's a terrorist attack in Libya. And it's just 56 days before an election. You can live with a protest about a video. That won't hurt you. But a terrorist attack will. So you can't be square with the American people. You can tell your family it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. You can tell the president of Libya it's a terrorist attack, but not the American people. And you can tell the Egyptian prime minister it's a terrorist attack, but you can't tell your own people the truth. Madam Secretary, Americans can live with the fact that good people sometimes give their lives for this country. They don't like it. They mourn for those families, they pray for those families, but they can live with it. But what they can't take, what they can't live with, is when their government's not square with them. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Madam Secretary, you're welcome to answer the question if you would like to.
Well,
Here comes
I
her
wrote a whole
non-answer
chapter
answer.
about this in my book, Hard Choices. I'd be glad to send it to you, Congressman, because I think the insinuations that you are making do a grave disservice to the hard work that people in the State Department, the intelligence community, the Defense Department, the White House did during the course of some very confusing and difficult days. There is no doubt in my mind that we did the best we could with the information that we had at the time. And if you actually go back and read what I said that night, I was very careful in saying that some have sought to justify. In fact, the man that has been arrested as one of the ringleaders of what happened in Benghazi, Ahmed Abu Khattala, is reported to have said it was the video that motivated him. None of us can speak to the individual motivations of those terrorists who overran our compound and who attacked our CIA annex. There were probably a number of different motivations. I think the intelligence community, which took the lead on trying to sort this out, as they should have, went through a series of interpretations and analysis. And we were all guided by that. We were not making up the intelligence. We were trying to get it, make sense of it, and then to share it. When I was speaking to the Egyptian prime minister, or in the other two examples you showed, we had been told by Ansar al-Sharia that they took credit for it. It wasn't until about 24 or more hours later that they retracted taking credit for
Secretary
it.
Clinton?
We also knew, Congressman, because my responsibility was for what was happening throughout the region. I needed to be talking about the video because I needed to be putting other governments and other people on notice that we were not going to let them get away with attacking us as they did in Tunis, as they did in Khartoum. And in Tunis, there were thousands of demonstrators who were there only because of the video, breaching the walls of our embassy, burning down the American school. I was calling everybody in the Tunisian government I could get, and finally President Marzouki sent his presidential guard to break it up. There were example after example. That's what I was trying to do during those very desperate and difficult hours.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Clinton, you said my insinuation. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm reading what you said. Plain language. We know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. That's as plain as it can get. That's vastly different than vicious behavior justified by internet material. Why didn't you just speak plain to the American people?
I did. If you look at my statement, as opposed to what I was saying to the Egyptian Prime Minister,
you got to stop it there. You got to stop it there because I can't take anymore. She won't answer the simple question. He has laid it out. He has said in your emails to your family, to the Libyan president and the Egyptian Prime Minister, you said this was a terrorist attack. We know who is behind it. We know. And to the American public, she said, this is basically somebody who put up some vicious internet stuff, blah, 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 and pointed at the film. She pointed fingers at the film. And it's, I don't know how anyone gets inspired by someone who was acting as the Secretary of State, who had American lives in her hands and failed to act, and now is failing to answer and be accountable and tell us the simple truth. And she cannot answer a simple question with a simple answer. And that's always a red flag to me. But anyway, we will be bringing you a little bit more of this throughout the show. But first, I want to tell you, the High Desert Association of Realtors is having a neighborhood watch meeting this next Wednesday, October 28th, at the High Desert Association of Realtors office on Hesperia Road. It's 11890 Hesperia Road. And the meeting will be at 3 p.m. and then again at 6 p.m. And by the way, if you've ever wanted to know how you could get involved and become part of the solution, protect your community, and keep a watchful eye and be vigilant so that you can help law enforcement to spot any trouble, well, you could actually connect with them because they have a sheriff's representative at every one of these meetings. They have them monthly, but the next one is coming up on Wednesday, October 28th, 3 p.m., 6 p.m. at the High Desert Association of Realtors office right on Hesperia Road between Bear Valley and Maine. Phone number is 760-244-8841. That's 760-244-8841 for more information. We will be right back after these messages. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. 323-746-TALK. You are tuned to the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. And we are picking apart and wading through the BS from Hillary Clinton. So far, she has not given a straightforward or honest answer about anything. The truth is almost always simple and doesn't require paragraphs. It's usually sentences or a few words. She could have just said, look, we were worried about the political implications, so we put out a political story to the American media because that works. And I was embarrassed that these deaths happened. I didn't really care about the people who died. She clearly didn't. She went and told the same story at their funerals. She kept spinning the same things that she knew were lies. She knew were fabrications. And it's funny, on the one hand, she says, no, I never said that. Go read my statement. And on the other hand, she says, oh, by the way, it was about the video because we never know the motivations. And if you weren't tuned in before, you need to be. She literally interrupts a congressman to plug her book, to say the arrogance of that comment. You should read my book, Congressman, Hard Choices, and I actually wrote a chapter, but it kept me awake at night. So I wrote a whole chapter on it. Well, here's the problem. And you know, I think the Democrats are going to be a little bit upset that they let Joe Biden out of the race. For him to have announced that the other day, and then for this to happen, there are so many clips where you can literally nail Hillary to the wall that if the Republican nominee in the Republicans Party do not utilize this, and let me be clear, I don't mean this the way that the Democrats mean it when they took Representative Kevin McCarthy's words, Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy's words out of context. McCarthy misspoke. He said something boneheaded that these hearings were all about bringing down Hillary's polls. He tied those two concepts together, which was a boneheaded thing to do, because then it made it sound like the whole purpose of these hearings is simply to get Hillary. No, the purpose of these hearings, and you can see it and hear it in Trey Gowdy, who is an excellent chairman, is to get the truth. And you know who we owe the truth to? We owe it to the families of the ambassador and the Navy SEALs who were on the roof and the personnel who were killed. That's who we owe it to. We owe it to Dorothy Woods, the wife of Tyrone Woods, who he was, by the way, the last man off the roof. He sent a younger man down who told him that he had a newborn. He kicked him off. He said, go, I got this. He never told that young man that he had a 4-month-old baby at home because he was that kind of leader. That life, the life of Tyrone Woods and the other Navy SEAL who were on that roof, Americans should not have to give up amazing people like that for no reason. And we deserve on behalf of his family, we deserve on behalf of all of those who serve, a clear and a concise explanation of the policy and the actions. That's all. We don't need all the politics. We don't need the right-wing conspiracy. We don't need the Republican versus Democrat BS. We just want our Secretary of State to tell us the truth. That's all. And I think we deserve that. And if you want to be my president, then tell me the truth. Tell the American people the simple truth. All this hiding behind words and nuances and trying to exercise your incredible command of the names of all these terrorists that she could say so well, just rolled off her tongue. Abu Kababi Kabul, or whatever the heck his name was. And she thinks you're going to be wowed. But as you're going to see, I think this hurts Hillary because she isn't truthful. And it's not the Republicans' fault. It's her fault. We'll have more right after these messages. Stay tuned. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clays. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344, 626-910-1344. This is the Radio Free California Network. We stream live at timdonnellyshow.com. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, email, Instagram, and even the age-old Alexander Graham Bell invention that you are texting on. 323-746-TALK is our number. And we're talking about, and we're bringing you clips so that you can hear for yourself without having to listen to the entire several hours of testimony. The highlights, the important points that were made. And I just want to create some context for this whole scenario so that you understand what happened if you're not familiar, so that you understand why it matters. On that day in Benghazi, it was 9/11. And there were reports of a protest rally going on in Cairo and I believe Tunisia. There were things happening around the world, especially the Islamic world, which were not surprising. In Egypt, they climbed up and they tore down the American flag at our embassy there, and I believe they hoisted the Islamic flag. So there were some anti-American protests throughout the Islamic world on 9/11. Surprise, surprise. But what happened in Benghazi, which is in Libya, was completely different. It was there were no protests, by the way, and they make that point early on. Had there been protests, Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio made the point. The ambassador would have been out the back door. They would have called in the security forces and closed the whole place down. But there was a surprise attack, a terrorist attack. And unfortunately, there were no assets anywhere near that could be deployed or that they chose to deploy. And that's a big question. Why were there not assets nearby? Why wasn't the call by the ambassador, Chris Stevens, for increased security? He makes the point that the British actually pulled out, and they were like the last embassy to pull out of Libya. And by the way, there was a fire sale on all their stuff. So Hillary goes on to actually say that she thinks he was just joking and had a good sense of humor. This is the person that wants to be your president, who takes a request for more security as if it were a joke. And Trey Gowdy, the chairman, grills her because if you've heard of, and you're going to hear him talk a lot about a man named Sidney Blumenthal. Sidney Blumenthal is an advisor, or was an advisor to Hillary Clinton during the Clinton presidency, during her time as senator, and also, but unofficially, during her time as Secretary of State, because President Obama refused to allow her to hire him. She tried. President Obama does not like Sidney Blumenthal, didn't want him involved in the State Department. And we find out, and Trey Gowdy's going to take you through it, we find out that she's in close contact with him, and he's one of her chief advisors, even though she'll never admit it. Anyway, let's roll that first clip from Gowdy.
I'm going to address a couple of things that he said and then recognize myself. Because he invoked the family members of the four, Madam Secretary, and partially this will be for your benefit also, but I want to specifically address the family members that are here. There is no theory of the prosecution, Mr. Schiff, because there is no prosecution. There's a very big difference between a prosecution where you already have reached a conclusion and you're just trying to prove it to people. This is an investigation, which is why it's so sad that nowhere in that stack that you just put up there, where the emails of Secretary Clinton, the emails of the ambassador, 50,000 pages worth of documents, eyewitnesses, that's the real tragedy. To the family and the friends, when you're told that there have been 7 previous investigations in an ARB, you should immediately ask, why did you miss so many witnesses? Why did you miss so many documents? This is not a prosecution, Mr. Schiff. You and I are both familiar with them. I've reached no conclusions, and I would advise you to not reach any conclusions either until we reach the end. There are 20 more witnesses. So I'll agree not to reach any conclusions if you'll do the same. With that, Madam Secretary, regardless of where he ranked in the order of advisors, it is undisputed that a significant number of your emails were to or from a Sidney Blumenthal. Now, he did not work for the State Department. He didn't work for the U.S. government at all. He wanted to work for the State Department, but the White House said no to him. Do you recall who specifically at the White House rejected Sidney Blumenthal?
No, I do not.
After he was turned down for a job at the State Department by the White House, he went to work where?
I think he had a number of consulting contracts with different entities.
Well, if he had a number of them, do you recall any of them?
I know that he did some work for my husband.
Well, he worked for the Clinton Foundation.
That's correct.
Okay. He worked for Media Matters.
I'm sure he did.
He worked for Correct the Record.
I'm sure he did.
When you were asked about Sidney Blumenthal, you said he was an old friend who sent you unsolicited emails, which you passed on in some instances because you wanted to hear from people outside what you called the bubble. We will ignore for a second whether or not Sidney Blumenthal is outside the bubble, but I do want to ask you about a couple of those other comments, because what you left out was that he was an old friend who knew absolutely nothing about Libya, was critical of President Obama and others that you work with, loved to send you political and image advice, had business interests in Libya, which he not only alerted you to, but solicited your help for. And you often forwarded his emails, but usually only after you redacted out any identifiers so nobody knew where the information was coming from. What does the word unsolicited mean to you?
It means that I did not ask him to send me the information that he sent me. And as I have previously stated, some of it I found interesting, some of it I did not, some of it I forwarded, some of it I did not. I did not know anything about any business interests. I thought that just as I said previously, newspaper articles, journalists, of which he is one, a former journalist, had some interesting insights. And so we we took them on board and evaluated them, and some were helpful and others were not.
We're going to get to all the points you just made, but I want to start with your public comment that these emails were unsolicited. You wrote to him, "Another keeper, thanks and please keep them coming. Greetings from Kabul and thanks for keeping this stuff coming. Any other info about it? Question mark. What are you hearing now? Question mark. Got it. We'll follow up tomorrow. Anything else to convey? Question mark." Now that one is interesting because that was the very email where Mr. Blumenthal was asking you to intervene on behalf of a business deal that he was pursuing in Libya. What did you mean by what are you hearing now?
I have no idea, Congressman. They started out unsolicited, and as I said, some were of interest. I passed them on, and some were not. And so he continued to provide me information that was made available to him.
I don't want to parse words, and I don't want to be hyper-technical, because it's not a huge point, but it is an important point. You didn't say they started off unsolicited. You said they were. You said they were unsolicited.
Well, they were unsolicited, but obviously I did respond to some of them.
Well,
and I'm sure that encouraged him.
Anything else
let's
to
pause
convey?
it right there, because
what are you hearing now?
I want to dig into this whole where she claims it's all unsolicited, and then you will hear her solicit his advice when we come back. 323-746-TALK if you have a comment. Tim Donnelly Show. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. Hey, if you're just tuning in, this is the Tim Donnelly Show, and we are playing you clips from today's hearings in Washington, D.C., where they are grilling the woman who could be, potentially, I know the thought may scare you, some of you, the next president of the United States, and it's not going as well as the debate. That's all I'm going to say. Democrats are probably going to be a little upset that they don't have an alternate. Joe Biden was a decent alternate. And by the way, you should read Donald Trump's tweets. He's rejoicing that Joe Biden's out of the race because Joe Biden would have been a very formidable opponent. Trump thinks he can destroy Clinton. And she's giving him a lot of ammunition today. Listen to this exchange between the chairman of the committee that is investigating Benghazi, Trey Gowdy from South Carolina, and Hillary on whether or not the emails that she was receiving from one Sidney Blumenthal, who is a very controversial figure. President Obama can't stand him, refused to allow Hillary to hire him. So listen carefully as Trey Gowdy exposes perhaps her motivations in keeping his identity secret when she forwards on some of the emails that he sends her.
Anything else to convey? What are you hearing now? I'm going to Paris tomorrow night. We'll meet with TNC leaders, so this and additional info useful. Still don't have electricity or BlackBerry coverage post-Irene, so I've had to resort to my new iPad. Let me know if you received this. We'll talk about the new iPad in a little bit. Here's another one. This report is in part a response to your questions. That's an email from him to you. This report is in part a response to your questions. There'll be further information in the next day. If you're the one asking him for information, how does that square with the definition of unsolicited?
I said it began that way, Mr. Chairman, and I will add that both Chris Stevens and Gene Kretz found some of the information interesting, far more than I could, because they knew some of the characters who were being mentioned, and they were the ones, the kind of persons with the expertise that I asked to evaluate to see whether there was any useful information.
We're going to get to that in a second. Now, before you give Mr. Blumenthal too much credit, you agree he didn't write a single one of those cables or memos he sent you.
I'm sorry, what?
He didn't write a single one of those cables or memos.
I don't know who wrote them. He's the one who sent them to me.
Would you be surprised to know not a single one of those was from him?
I don't know where he got the information that he was sending to me.
Did you ask? You're sending me very specific, detailed intelligence. What is your source? That seems to me like a pretty good question.
I did learn later that he was talking to or sharing information from former American intelligence officials.
By the name of? Who wrote those cables?
I don't recall. I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
You had his information passed on to others, but at least on one occasion you asked Ms. Abenine, can you print without any identifiers? Why would you want his name removed?
Because I thought that it would be more important to just look at the substance and to make a determination as to whether or not there was anything to it.
Well, don't people have a right to know the source of the information so they can determine credibility?
But he wasn't, as you just said, the source of the information.
But you didn't know that, Madam Secretary, and that's what you just said.
No, Mr. Chairman. I said that I knew that he didn't have the sources to provide that information. I knew he was getting it from somewhere else. He knew a lot of journalists, he knew others in Washington. It could have been a variety of people.
Well, if you're going to determine credibility, don't you want to know the source?
Well, it wasn't credibility so much as trying to follow the threads that were mentioned about individuals. And as I already stated, some of it was useful and some of it was not.
Well, did the president know that Mr. Blumenthal was advising you?
He wasn't advising me. And,
Did he
Mr.
know
Chairman,
that he was your most prolific emailer that we have found on the subjects of Libya and Benghazi?
That's because I didn't do most of my work
That's
about
fair.
Libya on
I'm
email.
not challenging that, Madam Secretary. I am not challenging that. All I'm telling you is the documents show he was your most prolific emailer on Libya and Benghazi. And my question to you is, did the president, the same White House that said you can't handle him, can't hire him, did he know that he was advising you?
He was not advising me, and I have no reason to have ever mentioned that or know that the president knew that.
All right, I want to draw your attention to an email about Libya from Mr. Blumenthal to you, dated April 2011. It will be Exhibit 67. And this is informative. Should we pass on, and in parentheticals, unidentified to the White House? If you were going to pass something on to the White House, why would you take off the identifiers?
Because it was important to evaluate the information, and from a lot of intelligence that I have certainly reviewed over the years, you often don't have the source of the intelligence. You look at the intelligence and you try to determine whether or not it is credible, whether it can be followed up on.
Well, I'm going to accept the fact that you and I come from different backgrounds, because I can tell you that an unsourced comment could never be uttered in any courtroom. You have
We're
to
not
have
talking
the right.
about courtrooms, Mr. Chairman.
No.
We're talking about intelligence.
No, we're talking about credibility and the ability to assess who a source is, and whether or not that source has ever been to Libya, knows anything about Libya, or has business interest in Libya, all of which would be important if you were going to determine the credibility, which I think is why you probably took his information off of what you sent to the White House.
It's inconceivable. I mean, Trey Gowdy, first of all, you got to love the guy. He's very patient. He's very thoughtful. He's very articulate. And he is interested in getting the facts. He's not interested in prosecuting Hillary Clinton. He makes that clear at the beginning of the clip. But here, when she says, I redacted the information on who the source was, in forwarding it to the White House, making it sound as if it were an obvious thing. No, the obvious thing would be to forward it with all the information intact so the president could see where it came from, because the very first question out of the president's mouth is probably going to be, where did we get this? Who is the source? And can we trust them? And are they credible? Because you can't evaluate information in a vacuum. You need to know, is it a trusted source? And when Trey Gowdy refers to being a prosecutor in a courtroom, he's absolutely correct. You don't take unsourced comments and turn them in as evidence. And for Hillary she sounds as if she doesn't even know what she's doing as Secretary of State by making those comments simply because she doesn't want to be honest and say, you know what? I mischaracterized those emails from Sidney Blumenthal, and I did so because I didn't want to get criticism from the White House. Obviously, there's no, it's not news to you. There's no love lost between me and President Obama. If she'd said that, people could relate to that and say, you know what? She's being honest. Obviously, she and the president don't get along. We don't know the genesis of all of that. But there's nothing wrong with her getting this information from Sidney Blumenthal, but she can't tell the truth. And he walks her through it. He shows how she kept asking for more and more comments, and she had him acting in an advisory role, literally prior to her going to an official meeting. That's how you would treat an official advisor, which of course you would do all on official email, and you would have meetings and telephone calls and in-person meetings and everything else. But the president didn't want him involved in foreign policy. He did not want him involved as one of her advisors in her official capacity. And yet clearly she had elevated him to that stance, to that position, to that status. And yet she can't just be honest. Even in the face of incontrovertible evidence, when her own words are read from her own emails, the ones they could find, she still lies. Yeah, and she wants to be the next president of the United States. 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls and have more clips when we return. Stay tuned. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344, 626-910-1344. If you are just tuning in to the Radio Free California Network, where have you been? We have been diligently combing through the email. Well, not all the emails. Nobody's seen all the emails. But we've been combing through the clips and the questions and the news articles on this epic hearing today in Washington, D.C., where the woman who hopes to be the Democrat nominee for president, Hillary Rodham Clinton, was grilled over all kinds of things, including her emails to one Sidney Blumenthal, who even President Obama didn't want involved in State Department business. And there was a representative, Mr. Pompeo, I'm not sure where he's from, but he was asking why it is that 100 emails from Sidney Blumenthal about Benghazi made it to Hillary Clinton's inbox, but she never afforded that same courtesy to the ambassador himself. Ambassador Chris Stevens had requested additional security. You'd think that would be something that would get kicked upstairs to someone of Hillary's stature, because it does have political implications. It is a hotbed of terrorism, and you do need to keep your people safe if you want to keep people working for you and putting their lives on the line. And by the way, when you serve in an embassy, there's always a CIA attachment to it. So you're there for the American interest. You're wearing the flag of this country. And it was shocking that Hillary Clinton states that none of the requests for additional security personnel or tightened security or increased security ever reached her, even though she got emails about supplies that were making their way to Libya and all kinds of other nonsensical, very low-level type requests. Kind of makes you wonder why she wanted to clean her entire server and only present what emails she chose to present. But Trey Gowdy, the chairman, he's a representative from South Carolina, is grilling her on this, and we'll let him continue here.
But here's another possible explanation that may give us a sense of why maybe the White House didn't want you to hire him in the first place. In one email, he wrote this about the President's Secretary of Defense: I infer Gates' problem is losing an internal debate. Tyler, and by the way, Tyler is Tyler Drumheller. That's who actually authored the cables that you got from Mr. Blumenthal. Tyler knows him well and says he's a mean, vicious little, I'm not going to say the word, but he did. This is an email from Blumenthal to you about the President's Secretary of Defense. And here's another Blumenthal email to you about President's National Security Advisor. Frankly, Tom Donlin's babbling rhetoric about narratives on a phone briefing of reporters on March the 10th has inspired derision among serious foreign policy analysts, both here and abroad. And here's another one from what you say is your old friend, Sidney Blumenthal. This is a quote from him. I would say Obama, and by the way, he left the president part out. I would say Obama appears to be intent on seizing defeat from the jaws of victory. He and his political cronies in the White House in Chicago are, to say the least, unenthusiastic about regime change in Libya. Obama's lukewarm and self-contradicting statements have produced what is, at least for the moment, operational paralysis. I think that may give us a better understanding of why the White House may have told you you cannot hire him. Blumenthal could not get hired by our government, didn't pass any background check at all, had no role with our government, had never been to Libya, had no expertise in Libya, was critical of the president and others that you worked with, shared polling data with you on the intervention in Libya, gave you political advice on how to take credit for Libya, all the while working for the Clinton Foundation and some pseudo-news entities. And Madam Secretary, he had unfettered access to you. And he used that access, at least on one occasion, to ask you to intervene on behalf of a business venture. Do you recall that?
You know, Mr. Chairman, if you don't have any friends who say unkind things privately, I congratulate you. But from my perspective,
I'd like to think I'd correct them.
I don't know what this line of questioning does to help us get to the bottom of the deaths for Americans.
I'll be happy to help you understand that, Madam Secretary.
But I want to reiterate what I said to Congresswoman Sanchez. These were originally unsolicited. You've just said that perhaps the main, if not the exclusive author, was a former intelligence agent for our country who rose to the highest levels of the CIA and who was given credit for being one of the very few who pointed out that the intelligence used by the Bush administration to go to war in Iraq was wrong. So I think that, the sharing of information from an old friend that I did not take at face value, that I sent on to those who were experts, is something that, makes sense, but it was certainly not in any way the primary source of or the predominant understanding that we had of what was going on in Libya and what we needed to be doing.
Well, Madam Secretary, I'm out of time, and we'll pick this back up the next round, but I'll go ahead and let you know ahead of time why it's relevant. It's relevant because our ambassador was asked to read and respond to Sidney Blumenthal's drivel. It was sent to him to read and react to. In some instances, on the very same day he was asking for security. So I think it is eminently fair to ask why Sidney Blumenthal had unfettered access to you, Madam Secretary, with whatever he wanted to talk about, and there's not a single solitary email to or from you to or from Ambassador Stevens. I think that is fair, and we'll take that up.
Gentlemen yield. Gentlemen yield.
Sure.
Wow.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you've made several inaccurate statements over the past month as you have tried to defend against multiple Republican admissions that the Select Committee has been wasting millions of tax dollars to damage Secretary Clinton's bid for president. On Sunday, you made another inaccurate statement during your appearance on Face the Nation, and it's being taken up here, and this is the relevance. Here's what you said, and I quote, "There are other folks who may have equities in her emails, and there may be other entities who are evaluating her emails. But my interest in them is solely making sure that I get everything I'm entitled to so that I can do my job. The rest of it, classification, Clinton Foundation, you name it, I have zero interest in it, which is why you haven't seen me send a subpoena related to it or interview a single person other than Brian Pagliano, because I need to know that the record is complete." And I'm going back to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I'm waiting.
Chairman, let me finish.
I'm waiting on you. I've been very patient.
Coming. Just wait.
I'm waiting on the inaccurate statement.
I'm getting there. Mr. Chairman.
Well, we got to take a break.
Statement was, well, it's not going to take long. You took up 4 minutes over, so let me have 3.
I've let everybody go over, including you, Mr.
Thank you very much. You issued a subpoena to Sidney Blumenthal on May 19th, 2015, compelling him to appear for a deposition on June 16, 2015. You issued this subpoena unilaterally without giving the Select Committee members the opportunity to debate or vote on it. You sent 2 armed marshals to serve the subpoena on Mrs. Blumenthal's wife at their home without having ever sent him a request to participate voluntarily, which he would have done. Then, Mr. Chairman, you personally attended Mr. Blumenthal's deposition. You personally asked him about the Clinton Foundation, and you personally directed your staff to ask questions about the Clinton Foundation, which they did more than 50 times. Now, these facts directly contradict the statements you made on national television this Sunday.
No, sir. With all due respect, they do not. We just heard email after email after email about Libya and Benghazi that Sidney Blumenthal sent to the Secretary of State. I don't care if he sent it by Morse code, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. The fact that he happened to send it by email is irrelevant. What is relevant is that he was sending information to the Secretary of State. That is what's relevant. Now, with respect to the subpoena, if he'd bothered to answer the telephone calls of our committee, he wouldn't have needed a subpoena.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to, but you need to make sure the entire record is correct, Mr. Cummings.
And that's exactly what I want to do.
Well, then go ahead.
I'm about to tell you. I moved that we put into the record the entire transcript of Sidney Blumenthal. We're going to release the emails. Let's do the transcript. That way the world can see it.
Well, we didn't.
The motion has been seconded.
Well, we're not going to take that up at a hearing. We'll take that up in a business
I've consulted
meeting
with the parliamentarian, and they have informed us that we have a right to a recorded vote on that motion. We want,
I'll tell you what, let's do
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, that's what we want to have. Let the world see it.
Why is it that you only want Mr. Blumenthal's transcript released? Why don't you
I'd
want
like
the
to have all of them
survivors?
released.
The survivors, even their names?
Let me
you
tell
want
you
that?
something. No,
you want that released?
Let me tell you something. Right now,
The only one
right
you've
now,
asked
the
for
only
is Sidney Blumenthal. That's the only one you've asked for. That and Miss Mills.
Cheryl Mills.
That's not true.
Now, that's 2 out of 54. Now, if you want to ask for some fact
We asked
witnesses...
for a recorded vote on the Blumenthal. You said from the beginning, we want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Why don't we just put the entire transcript out there and let the world see it? What do you have to hide?
His are the only emails that you have released. And the fairness to Mr. Blumenthal and to the American people, in the interest of a complete record, if you're going to release his emails, release his transcript where he has a chance to give the context of those emails.
Well, you keep referring to Blumenthal emails. I would hasten to remind both of you, the only reason we have Blumenthal emails is because he emailed the Secretary of State. Those are her emails. That's why they were released. They're not Blumenthal's emails, and she wanted all of her emails released. She's been saying since March, I want the entire world to see my emails. Well, Sidney Blumenthal's emails are part of that. So here's what I'll do. I'll be happy to talk to the parliamentarian, because the parliamentarian told me that your motion actually would not be in order for a hearing. But at the latest, we'll take a vote. And the first week we are back, after this week, we'll have a business meeting. We can take up Mr. Blumenthal's transcript. We can take up whatever other transcripts you want. And while we're there, we can also take
what
up
was
the
transpiring
20-some-odd outstanding
today
discovery
in
requests
Washington,
that we have.
D.C. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with more, including your calls, 323-746-TALK. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at Turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turners is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. You know, it's probably going to be a rarity to hear me in agreement with President Obama. But when we had Ed Klein on the other day, who has written a book called Unlikable, The Problem with Hillary, and he stated that President Obama believes that Hillary is a liar. And I don't know what else you can conclude after listening to the footage that we've aired today. It never ends. Every time you turn around, she has an alternate explanation that defies common sense for every question. She's asked about emails. She says, I don't email during the day. Who doesn't email during the day? And then we find out she emailed Sidney Blumenthal the morning of the Benghazi tragedy. So, yeah, certainly she emails. She raised the YouTube video that was released, that very crudely done attack on Islam that she then pointed a finger at. And then she claims, well, if you read my statement, I told you the truth, which was that this was all about terrorism, but she never did. She privately told people in email, which maybe it was evening and she was able to send emails, but she told her daughter, Chelsea, she told her family, she told her she, in her official capacity, she emailed the Libyan president and the Egyptian prime minister and said this was clearly, absolutely, unequivocally a terrorist attack. And we believe we've even identified who was behind it. And she names a terror group. And then she lies about it. She doesn't just own it. Because the simple truth was that when she brought up the YouTube video, she was just doing CYA. And even her own people at the State Department, it wasn't Trey Gowdy, it was Representative Jim Jordan, put up on a big projector screen. Look at the comments about this Susan Rice going out and making a big deal out of this YouTube video, when the real truth, they knew the truth, and they presented a lie to the American people. You know, when you go on the Sunday talk shows, you know what you're doing? That is one of the ways in which we communicate, or I say we as if I'm in the government. I'm not. But when you're an elected official or an appointed official or a constitutional officer, you're a representative of the government. That's how you communicate with the people. Because what happens is it's stated there, questions are asked, you get to the underlying facts, and then newspaper articles are written about it, blogs and video is posted, and now you have informed the public. But what Hillary did by sending Susan Rice out, she misinformed the public by herself starting the narrative that it was about the YouTube video. Before the shooting had even stopped, before the battle was over, before the dust had even cleared. She is characterizing this in a way that is inaccurate in order to cover her ass. Well, I won't get into how big it is. We'll leave that alone. But in order to cover Obama's ass and his administration, but mostly to cover hers. She's very cognizant that she's going to be running for president. So how this is perceived is immediately perhaps even her first concern. Okay, let's forgive her that. Let's forgive her for being political first, just for a moment. Okay, I get it. But why lie? Nobody's going to be mad at Hillary Clinton if there's a terrorist attack in Libya. They're going to be mad that security wasn't beefed up. Yeah. And that blame is going to go to her. She can transfer that blame to Obama, whatever. That's politics. But the real issue is, why didn't she beef up security? And the real issue is, why didn't she have a clear line of communication to the ambassador like she did to her friend? Well, we'll get into that and more. 323-746-TALK when we come back.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
Hey, this is the Tim Donnelly Show, and of course, I am Tim Donnelly, your host. But it goes straight to the phones. Get your reaction to the action today on Hillary in Washington, D.C. Hey, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Tim, this is Dennis from Pinion Hills.
Hi, Dennis. What did you think of what transpired?
I was only able to watch a couple hours of the hearings today, but that one clip you played on the question of when Trey Gowdy asked Hillary about was there any business interest discussed with Sidney Blumenthal, and she dodged the question, and they didn't get back to it. I was just wondering if that question was put to her later on, because I was hoping for an answer on that one.
No, I didn't. I did not hear that question revisited it. And you know what? She was very adroit. I think you identified it well. She dodged everything. She was very adept and adroit at just taking it and turning it around. She threw it back at Chairman Gowdy and said, well, I'm sure that you've never had any business, but the bottom line is she never gave a straight answer about anything. That's what's so infuriating. And I get it, that you want to be political.
I'll tell you, the upside of these hearings, a couple of them, we got the whole world watching. And, democracy isn't perfect. We have a free country. But when we have to question people, especially people in the top positions, they have to answer. And it doesn't work like that in a lot of other countries. And I think that is the plus. And
yeah, I would agree with you there. But let me tell you where I am disappointed. If you had anything even remotely close to what happened in Benghazi happening back during the Watergate years, there would have been resignations because people would have identified that they had failed in their official duties, that they had let down the public, and that they had done things that were inappropriate or illegal or wrong, and they would have resigned. And it's not about the Republican-Democrat thing. It's about the times and the morality of the times where there was a sense of obligation to the public. Now, every politician, they just dig a deeper bunker and they get bigger bombs and they just go after their opponents. And Hillary is the best at that. She always goes to the right-wing conspiracy. It's never, ever about what Hillary did or what Hillary said or what Hillary knew. She's never, ever, and through this whole thing, she doesn't answer a single question with any level of accountability.
Yeah, she's constantly in denial, and that's the way it's worked for a long time. And what really gets me, and, it's been going on for a while, but the people out there don't really care if somebody in charge tells the truth anymore. They'll go ahead and overlook it. They'll vote for them. They'll condone it. They say no big deal. And
I would disagree with you on one front. If this was George Bush in that hot seat, the media would be all over it. It would be live feeds on every television. It would be front page news. It would be 24-hour coverage. It would never stop until George Bush resigned or died or buried himself somewhere because of their hatred and their partisanship. But they won't hold their own person accountable. And yet, during Watergate, Republicans held Republicans accountable, and the truth came out, and people resigned, and they went to prison. Some of them for a long time. Anyway, Dennis, thanks for the call. I gotta let you go because I've got my good friend Anne Marie Morell of CEO, chief editor, and woman about town at politichicks.com. Anne Marie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. What a yucky day.
Oh, it's a crazy day.
Having to watch. Oh, man.
I'm sure you've heard some of the coverage and some of the clips. We've been covering the fact that it doesn't matter if you ask Hillary, hey, Hillary, did you wear a blue pantsuit yesterday or a pink one? Her answer will be, well, Congressman, it depends on what the meaning of the word blue and whether or not you're actually talking about pastels or hues or and then she'll go off on a long tangent. I mean, I've never.
Well, that's what Clintons do. They do whatever they want to do until DNA evidence proves unequivocally that they are guilty of something, and even then, they will laugh
Anne-Marie,
it off.
you didn't need to go straight to the blue dress. Come on, let's leave Monica out of this right now. This is about Hillary, and we're trying to get her put in jail so I can have a lot more fun. I mean,
I should have known that was going to trigger that. I just should have known.
I want to run a clip for you of Representative Jim Jordan. Actually, I think we'll do it when we come back from a break because it's a couple minutes long, and I want to get your reaction. Because he did what I would call the new definition, the new textbook on exactly how to grill someone with the right tone, the right attitude. This guy had his entire presentation researched. He was calm and he was very, very likable, by the way, when he presented. And he just struck the perfect tone. And I want you to hear it. It's a couple minutes long. So let's take a quick break now, and we'll come back, play you that clip, and I want to get your reaction. 323-746-TALK if you want to call in. We'll be right back. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at Turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turners is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. You have found your way to the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. We are talking to Anne-Marie Morell, Politichicks.com, CEO, founder, senior editor, and political commentator. And Anne-Marie, we're going to play you a little clip of Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, who just listen to this question that he asks and the buildup and the facts he lays out. And then we'll listen to a little bit of Hillary's answer, and I want to get your take on it.
Gentlelady from California yields back. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just gave a long answer, Madam Secretary, to Ms. Sanchez about what you heard that night, what you're doing, but nowhere in there did you mention a video. You didn't mention a video because there was never a video-inspired protest in Benghazi. There was in Cairo, but not in Benghazi. Victoria Nuland, your spokesperson at the State Department, hours after the attack said this: Benghazi has been attacked by militants. In Cairo, police have removed demonstrators. Benghazi, you got weapons and explosions. Cairo, you got spray paint and rocks. 1 hour before the attack in Benghazi, Chris Stevens walks the diplomat to the front gate. The ambassador didn't report a demonstration. He didn't report it because it never happened. An eyewitness in the command center that night on the ground said no protest, no demonstration. 2 intelligence reports that day. No protest, no demonstration. The attack starts at 3:42 Eastern Time. ends at approximately 11:40 p.m. that night. At 4:06, an ops alert goes out across the State Department. It says this: mission under attack, armed men, shots fired, explosions heard. No mention of a video, no mention of a protest, no mention of a demonstration. But the best evidence is Greg Hicks, the number 2 guy in Libya, the guy who worked side by side with Ambassador Stevens. He was asked if there had been a protest, would the ambassador have reported it? Mr. Hicks' response: absolutely. For there to have been a demonstration on Chris Stevens' front door and him not to have reported it is unbelievable, Mr. Hicks said. He said, secondly, if it had been reported, he would have been out the back door within minutes, and there was a back gate. Everything points to a terrorist attack. We just heard from Mr. Pompeo about the long history of terrorist incidents, terrorist violence in the country. And yet 5 days later, Susan Rice goes on 5 TV shows, and she says this: Benghazi was a spontaneous reaction as a consequence of a video. A statement we all know is false. But don't take my word for it. Here's what others have said. Rice was off the reservation on 5 networks. White House worried about the politics. Republicans didn't make those statements. They were made by the people who work for you in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau, the actual experts on Libya in the State Department. So, if there's no evidence for a video-inspired protest, then where'd the false narrative start? Started with you, Madam Secretary. At 10:08, on the night of the attack, you released this statement: some have sought to justify the vicious behavior as a response to inflammatory material posted on the internet. At 10:08, with no evidence, at 10:08, before the attack is over, at 10:08, when Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty are still on the roof of the annex fighting for their lives, the official statement of the State Department blames a video. Why?
During the day on September 11th, as you did mention, Congressman, there was a very large protest against our embassy in Cairo. Protesters breached the walls. They tore down the American flag. And it was of grave concern to us because the inflammatory video had been shown on Egyptian television, which has a broader reach than just inside Egypt.
Let's pause it right there.
And if you...
We played this earlier, and then later on, he's gonna come back and he's gonna say, hey, look, by the way, here is what you told your family, which is that this was a terrorist attack. Here is what you told the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister. Why do you go out and tell the American public that it was this video? And obviously it has something to do with politics. But the way he presented all those facts and the way that he continues to come back at her very calmly, very methodically, and he has his facts at the ready, puts them up on the big projection screen, pulls out her own words, and yet she disputes and says you've mischaracterized and says all these other things to him. My question to you, Anne Marie, is, isn't that the way that Republicans ought to go about getting to the truth? On the flip side of all of it, once they've gotten to the truth, there are going to be political consequences to the fact that Hillary just can't answer a simple question.
Well, the key word there is can't. She can't. If she does, if she owns up to any part of this, she's sunk, and she knows it. You know, she took a week, all of last week, she took off a whole week of campaigning, and she's been working with her people. They've been coaching her. They've been directing her how she needs to talk, how she needs to present herself, the tone of her voice, everything. She cannot admit to anything other than, I recognize my mistake, I fixed everything, it's no big deal.
Well, none of that's working. None of that's working for her, because he comes back to her with facts in her own words, because she said something about how he is sort of insinuating. And he said, no, Madam Secretary, I am not insinuating. Let me repeat. Let me show you. These are your own words. And you will not believe what she does. She actually lectures him. She goes into, she lost whatever coaching she got on tone and attitude and literally says, Congressman, you should read my book. This upset me so much. I stayed up at night and I devoted a whole chapter to this situation. And if you read it, it would educate you and you would then understand. And she names her book Hard Choices. I mean, I couldn't believe it. You've got the victims' families in the audience while she is speaking, and she has the gall to say that. And I have met the wife of Tyrone Woods, who was the last Navy SEAL. He had sent all of his guys down except one, and he and that guy collapsed with the roof when the final attack hit. And he was an incredible hero. She is an extraordinary woman who is just, she doesn't care about politics. She just wants the truth. She wants the truth on behalf of her husband and everyone like him who is out there in harm's way. And Hillary is dinking around with all these half-truths, innuendos, accusations, and feints, but never once does she give this the seriousness and gravity and own any of it.
But I mean, Tim, again, she can't. She literally can't do that. She can't admit to anything more than she already has. She's painting herself to be the victim. That's what all of this is about. That's how she's trying desperately to make it look like I've done everything I can. But according to Kevin McCarthy, this is a Republican witch hunt. This is all about Republican. That's what every single scandal that's happened throughout the entire Obama administration, that's been their answer to all of it.
Well,
none of this is all about politics. It's about Republicans attacking Democrats.
Sure.
And that's it.
But that's Clinton's way. I mean, right-wing conspiracy. Remember when they were coming after her husband and finally the facts came out on Jennifer Flowers and a whole bunch of other women, and it was right-wing conspiracy. It wasn't Bill. It wasn't, these women. It was right-wing conspiracy. So here's the problem that I think she's going to have, which is the more and more this comes out and the more there's clarity, I think a lot of Democrats might be going to Joe Biden and saying, hey, we need somebody else because she ain't cutting it. And I just feel like Democrats are going to be regretting the loss of Joe Biden as an option after today's performance.
I don't know. I'm still hearing so much in the background that our side, we're very upset. All of us are upset. And everyone with common sense understands that she absolutely lied. It was absolutely lies and cover-ups. And like what you said earlier, if this had been, if she'd been a Republican, if this had been a Republican administration, this would have been over long ago. This would have been over soon after it happened. It would have been over in 2013. This woman would be in jail by now. I guarantee you, if it had been a Republican administration. This is what happens to Democrats. We can't. Trey Gowdy's wonderful. I love him to death. But why is it taking this long anyway? I mean, none of it makes any sense. None of this is common sense. She's a criminal. She lied. She hid things. She covered things up. We all know that. But is anything going to come out of it? I wish I were more hopeful about it. But I don't think anything's going to come out of it.
Well, we also know that the news media, the left-wing mainstream media, is complicit in covering up for her, in protecting the narrative of who they are presenting Hillary Clinton as. And they've been doing this since all the way back to the very beginning of the Clintons' emergence in politics. And, just yesterday I had Roger Stone on with Clinton's War on Women, and the day before that I had Ed Klein on talking about unlikable, the problem with Hillary. And there's this pattern that goes all the way through it. But you'd think when you're on this kind of a stage that she would understand that she has to transcend that. She has to leave that behind. But by perpetuating that same pattern, she's just going to bring all that other stuff into play. We're gonna have to leave it. We're gonna have to leave it there. Hang on, Anne-Marie. Can you stay on with me for one more segment? All right, we will be right back with Anne-Marie Morell and more on Hillary when we get back.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
Hey, you are listening to the Tim Donnelly Show on your drive home. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking with Politichic's founder, Anne-Marie Morell, who is weighing in on the Hillary hearings today at the Trey Gowdy committee. And I thought Trey Gowdy did an extraordinary job, because one of the things he did, Anne-Marie, is he brought out the hypocrisy and irresponsibility of one simple thing. And that was her friend Sidney Blumenthal, who is acting as an unofficial official advisor to the State Department, mind you, against the express wishes of the president. She tries to hide this. He brings it out. She characterizes it as unsolicited advice, and then he shows her own emails, shows the whole world that she solicited his advice. She specifically asked for more and more advice from him, and he had 100 emails in to her over Benghazi, and yet she had never communicated with Ambassador Chris Stevens. Ambassador Chris Stevens did not have her cell phone, did not have her home number, did not have her fax, did not have her home address. Sidney Blumenthal had all of that, had access to her. She had seen requests for supplies for the Benghazi embassy, and yet she claims to have had no knowledge, no contact with Ambassador Chris Stevens, other than a conversation or one single email that reached her, and she claims she thought it was all a joke, that he really didn't want more security, that he was just making a joke about the fact the British had pulled out and they were having a fire sale on all their furnishings because they were abandoning their embassy.
Right. She knew full well that it was a volatile situation, and nearing the anniversary of 9/11, that alone, if you hear, why would that be a joke? Why would I can't even fathom how she's validating this and justifying this, and how those words can come out of her mouth. But that's who she is.
Yeah, she claimed she thought that the fire sale comment was just being humorous. Look, Stevens had told multiple people that he was concerned about the situation. The situation was deteriorating in Libya, and that he needed more security. And the backdrop of it is every other civilized nation is pulling their people out for their own safety. So this is not a laughing matter. It's not a joking matter. But the attitude with which she is approaching this This is being watched by not only all of our military personnel and our diplomatic corps who put their lives on the line, but this is being watched by our allies and our enemies. And for her to even let that out of her mouth is criminal.
Mm-hmm. Let's also just pretend. Let's pretend that they really were concerned with that stupid video. Let's just pretend. Even if they thought that video nearing 9/11, knowing the volatile situation that was happening, that there were revolutions and that people were protesting in Cairo, knowing that, because they will admit that they knew that, why wouldn't they assume, why wouldn't they know that there was going to be problems at all of their embassies? Let's not just say Benghazi, let's say all of the embassies in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Why would they ignore
you make a good point.
Anything, knowing what they know?
Why wouldn't they?
What they admit they knew. They admit that much. So why can't they admit, yes, we should have beefed up security and protected our people?
No, I agree. And at least had some kind of a plan. Double, triple the security, have assets within striking distance as you would for any threat. That would have made some sense, but that also would have shown, politically, to have taken that action, I believe, would have put them at odds with this bizarre pro-Islamic stance that the State Department and the Obama administration have taken. And it's one thing to take that stance politically and use words that way, which, yes, that offends a lot of Americans, but to have it affect operational security and actually whether or not you're protecting the people, knowing that they're going to storm your embassy, tear down your flag, and put up the Islamic flag on the anniversary of 9/11, and they had to know that there was chatter everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things that has to be, and I'm speculating, but it has to be the reason why she was so secretive about her emails, why she deleted them, destroyed them, thought they were gone, claimed they were gone. It has to be the reason. There's something there among all those emails that have been hidden and that she's been hiding from us. Even if it's one communication between her and Chris Stevens where she denied, or who knows. That's the reason, though. But that's also the reason why she's fighting so hard to make the email thing a joke. That's the reason on the debate stage, Bernie Sanders helped her by making the whole email thing a big giant joke. Oh, it's just another Republican phony scandal. Then they can get rid of the only proof that they may have that any of this that she was aware of any of it. So it's all just so ugly and twisted and despicable. And if I wish that this world, I wish that we could just erase the letters D and R. But that's all this is about. It's all political. It doesn't matter to them that 4 people died. They want to hang on to their power in Washington, and that's all that really matters to her. That's why she said that. What difference does it make?
Yeah, what difference does it make? Well, I'll tell you what, Representative Westmoreland nailed her because she kept saying, well, I've been kept awake at night. I haven't slept. I've been racking my brain to try to think of what we could have done differently. So he asked her, what could you have done differently? And she scrambles and comes up with generic type answers, mentions something about security. And then he follows up and he says, but I thought you didn't get involved in any of the security. And see, then she hems and haws and doesn't know what to say. And and the bottom line is, you have someone who I believe is unfit to hold that type of office where you have the security of Americans, where you have the policies that literally affect our position in the world being executed by someone who has no regard for the lives, the security, or any amount of transparency in her own actions. And those individuals died on her watch because she failed to do her job.
Right. And I like the question, too, and I hope they keep hammering her about this. It's why. Why? And why the decision to blame it on that video, the YouTube video? Why? What was the thinking or the non-thinking or whatever behind that? They're coming up with their Sunday talking points, blaming it on the video. Why did you do that? Why did you do? Who authorized this? Why? That's another question I don't want them to let up on, because that was an outright, blatant lie, along with everything else. But that in particular was such a strange thing to blame it on when they knew that it could be proven otherwise, and it was, and it has been. But why?
Yeah, and every single time she is asked that question, she prevaricates. She goes off on tangents. She blames some. At one point, she actually blames Ambassador Stevens, or implies that it was his responsibility to get more security for his embassy. Here he he submits requests. Yeah. He talks to her or emails her, or somehow communicates to her. He submits requests up through channels. They never reach her. And there were other embassies looking for that same increase in security and that same protection, and none of their requests ever made it through to Hillary. But the Sidney Blumenthal's emails, hundreds of them got through immediately, same day. She responds to them within minutes, and yet when it comes to the official duties of protecting the diplomatic corps throughout the world. How they
I know that.
Yeah, sorry. It gets me so upset.
No, I know. Me too. It's something that's been a focus of politics since the beginning. We at least we've tried once a month to put some article out about Benghazi, just to keep it in the news so people don't forget about it, like we did Fast and Furious and everything else that's happened to America. The thing is, yes, absolutely, Middle East, any kind of embassy in the Middle East is going to be volatile for Americans. I mean, they hate us. So, of course, that's a dangerous job to have. And we all know that. But when it's a volatile time, especially when something is escalated, anything is escalated in the world, including supposedly that video. Why? They knew this. They knew that. They claimed they knew the video was a problem. They were all upset about it here in America. So that's the other question they've got to keep going back to. Why, if they knew that caused problems, wouldn't they protect their people? They were protecting them from Americans, from American video makers. I mean, maybe word it that way instead of Islamic terrorists. Just, I don't know. But again, they can't admit to anything. They just can't. It's a house of cards. If they admit to one thing, everything else is going to fall down.
Well, the one thing I want to say is you had referenced how the Democrats and the media have turned this into an R versus D, Republican versus Democrats, and taken Kevin McCarthy's comment, a poorly worded comment, and turned it into an indictment of Trey Gowdy's committee. Let me tell you, Trey Gowdy did not allow the media to see her. He swore her in privately behind closed doors. So she wasn't shown out there raising her right hand, which of course would have been pejorative when you see somebody testifying before a committee holding up their hand, because it can be construed, politically. But so he did that. And he also went above and beyond, I thought, in the clarity in his search for emails that were strictly related to Benghazi and Libya and nothing else. And he did an extraordinary job of that. And yet he's still accused of partisanship by Elijah Cummings. They get into a big argument on the stand. And Trey Gowdy stuck to his guns and kept saying, hey, bottom line, these are related to Benghazi. That's why they're here. And that's it. And that's as far as he's looking to go. And it is the Democrats, it is Hillary and her people that are trying to politicize and turn this into a circus rather than a simple hunt for the truth.
they have to go. I'm almost feeling like I need to defend them. That's what they have to do. That's who they are. It's what they do. That's the only way that they're staying, that the party, whatever's left of the Democrat Party, is staying alive. They have to say, oh, this is a phony scandal with every single thing that's happened. You go back from the very beginning with the new Black Panther case, with Fast and Furious, with the IRS, with the VA scandal. They politicized that. They turned that into something with, oh, people don't like Barack Obama because he's black, and that's why veterans are dying. I mean, they turned everything into a Republican phony scandal thing.
Well, I don't think it's going to work here, but Anne-Marie Morell, you have had the final word. Anne-Marie Morell, Politichicks.com. We've got to go take a final break. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Anytime, Jim.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at Turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turners is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. Final segment here at the Tim Donnelly Show. We've been talking all day about Hillary on the grill, Hill on the grill. And I'm sure the left stream media will tell you she did wonderfully and she held up and she was presidential and everything else. But when it came down to overcoming perhaps Hillary's biggest challenge, and here's the funny thing about politics, perception is everything. Doesn't matter what you think you have portrayed. All that matters is how people perceive you. That's what they receive. They're on the receiving end of what you're presenting is what people take away. And the majority of Americans think she was untrustworthy before. And now, after this performance, it's going to be chopped up. It's going to be dissected. It's going to be available on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube videos, it's going to be available on blogs. It already is. We pulled it from all kinds of different sources. And people are going to go through, and there's things you don't get away with. When you're the Secretary of State of the most powerful country in the world, the most significant country in the world, you don't get to say, I don't email during the day. That's like saying the dog ate my homework. Everybody knows it's a lie. It's a provable lie because the FBI and a whole bunch of other investigatory organizations are in possession of her server and her emails, and you can prove that she emailed during the day. You couldn't be an elected official and not email during the day and do your job. It's not even possible, and anybody who works for a living would laugh at the notion. And yet she presents it as if it is absolutely true and as if it is a defense. And then when she goes to this politicization of this whole event by claiming that her opponents are politicizing it, claiming the Republicans are politicizing it, claiming it was a big gotcha right-wing conspiracy. Well, let me tell you something. I was at an event a year ago in Tucson where I met Dorothy Woods, the wife of the Navy SEAL Tyrone Woods, who was the leader of that group that was on the roof. And he's an extraordinary man with an extraordinary story. And his wife, I don't know how she was able to hold it together. She gave a speech, and I was riveted. I waited in a long line just to shake her hand and thank her for continuing to fight for the truth. I tried to get her on this show, and the man that is acting as sort of the gatekeeper for her told me, we are trying to let this process play out. We want to get to the truth. We don't want to go out and be overtly political. Think about that. What a contrast. The class and respect of the widow versus the... Well, here I am out of time. Hey, I want to thank Sean McNeil, acting producer and engineer, all of our sponsors, and you. God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show, out.